Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live episode of To the Moon, Allison, where we talk about the top and trending works in speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and romance. I'm your host, Allison Martine Hubbard, author of romance books and works of speculative fiction. And I am so excited to be joined today by author of The Surviving Sky, the first in the Rages trilogy, and I'm already botching things, Kritika H. Rao. Welcome, Kritika.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And I guess my first question is, where are you? Because if you look at your bio, you have lived everywhere. And time zones, it's like spin the wheel. What
Yeah.
time is it for you and where are you? Like, is that daylight or is that faking me out?
No, it is daylight, and it's actually it's been there's been a lot of forest fires around where I am. So I'm in Calgary, in Alberta, in Canada, and it is noon right now, and the sky looks super apocalyptic. It's not actually, there's no fires here in Calgary, but around us is, in the Banff area and everything, there's some forest fires. You can really kind of see the smoke, and you can kind of smell it too, and it's, yeah.
Well, I'm
But
from SoCal, so I get the forest fires thing.
yeah,
And whenever we've had it bad, I'll take pictures where it's like the sky today is more yellow than blue, but at
yeah,
least I can kind of breathe. So that's maybe helpful. I'm not sure.
that's a
But
plus. That's a plus.
hopefully contain those fires so the people around you don't lose homes and
Yeah,
animals and all that stuff. But we are
yeah.
here to talk today about your first book in your Rages trilogy, The Surviving Sky. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about this first book in the trilogy, we'd love to hear about it.
Sure. So as you kind of know, my name is Kritika H. Rao. You can kind of see it there. And the book is called The Surviving Sky. And I have a copy of it right here. Um, so this book is about a husband and wife married couple who are trying to save their floating plant city from crashing into jungle storms. And it is epic science fantasy. It's based on Hindu philosophy. It is full of adventure and action and lots of drama. And I love it to death. It's the first of a trilogy. Um, and this is my debut, although like I've been writing for a really long time, but this is my debut, and it's coming out via Titan Books. Yep.
Next month? I want to say June 13th is what I saw, but sometimes things release differently because Canada may not have the same release date as US does. So if
Yeah,
you have a different release date, you can
it is
let
June
me know.
13th all over the world, which is super nice because it's only one date I kind of have to keep track of, and
Yeah,
and it's
talking
coming
about like
closer.
UK releases and it's different dates. It's like, wait, how come I don't have the book yet? Oh, you're in California. You can't have it.
Yeah, and then it's just so much more stress. Like, you're like, okay, is the book out? And you're like only halfway. And
For you guys, it's not even
yeah,
like people can get on like a VPN server and be like, can I get my Kindle to think it's in another place? So, no,
yeah,
sorry, you
no.
are where you are and you will have to wait. I was lucky enough, I got an ARC copy. So I don't have a physical copy. I read it digitally. So I got to read it, but I'm like, I can't even squee about it with anybody because nobody else has it yet. So that's like the
Yeah,
hard part when you get to read early because you can't share the excitement with people who are reading along with you. I have to like wait for everybody to catch up next month. So just telling
yeah.
people go read it when you can if you don't have a NetGalley copy or lucky enough to get one of the ARCs. And I think you have a giveaway for the book right now too. Is that right?
Yes, it's happening on Goodreads. So if you have accounts on Goodreads, then there's one of 50 copies that you can grab. So yeah, go enter. It's going. I think it started yesterday, the giveaway. So yeah, got
I
lots of
think I
time.
got the notifications like author you follow is
Nice,
doing a giveaway. I'm like, I already have that book, so I will leave that
nice.
to other people who are looking for it. Greedy, gimme. I sometimes do that when I do like the author giveaways by someone I know I'm going to buy the book from. I'm like, I should let them build their fan base and not just be like, ooh, more books.
More shiny, yeah.
Isn't that like our natural reaction? Like, ooh, you can give me the book. Like, no, let other people have the books. Be cheerful, Allison.
Yeah.
But I adored reading it. And I think my first question would be, is there going to be a wiki for people like me who are going to get lost in there's biology, there's metaphysics, there's philosophy, there's all this going on. And you hit us with it fast and furious. And you do it so well that I followed all of it. But I felt like I also maybe should be taking notes in case I forgot something along the way. So I'm like, is there going to be a wiki? Are you going to do a wiki
Just
for us?
just have a little highlighter, and like a little
Exactly.
notes for yourself. I don't know if there's going to be a wiki. I mean, as far as I understand, wikis are more kind of fan based, and like people kind of create it when if they want to. So if there's anyone out there who wants to make a wiki, go wild. Like I am more than happy to have one. Like I feel like I'm going to need to
Right here is
refer
I
to
need the
it.
wiki and I need to create the wiki for you. Okay, now I know. We'll have to figure that out because you have like these two key characters, and like you said, they're a married couple, but boy, are they having some issues with their marriage. Let me just
Yeah.
say, it was not smooth sailing for these two, not even for a moment, and not for their floating island either. And I love that you showed the cover earlier because this is one of the most beautiful covers.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean, one of the best things
Look
about
at
that
that.
cover, can you see that? Is that the cover actually has something to do with the book. Go figure. The number of covers you see where it's like, that's really pretty. What does it mean? Nothing. It's just
Yeah.
pretty. But that's
Yeah.
like, I actually was picturing this ashram as it's Nakshar is the name of the island.
Nakshar. Yeah.
And it's this place that there's multiple islands, multiple ashrams floating around, and each one's kind of self-contained, but they do relate to each other and they trade people who have different roles. So it's like in your wiki, we're gonna have like roles in the society because you've got your architects who aren't architects. So anybody who's like, oh, I like to draw with pencils and straight, nope, you are moving plants around with the power of your mind, first off.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go ahead and have people who are sungeneers. And I feel like we should have those now already. So I know you made that word up, but I feel like it should be a real word.
Yeah, I agree. I love that word. It is, and yeah, there's so many different roles in the society and everything. But going back to the cover for a second, I love this cover so much. Like you're right, like it actually has so much to do with the book, but also like if you're gonna see the cover, it is like super like contained, but also like has this like element of like being so expansive. You can kind of see the jungle storms, you can see like the
Yes.
city, you can see like the root ball, and it's awesome. And one of the things I love about the covers, and I say this often, is like if you kind of took like a magnifying glass to it and looked through it, you would see so much detail. Like when I was kind of working with my team and the art team, etc., and kind of looking at the cover, like I magnified it and I saw how deeply like some details kind of pop when you kind of stare at it, like all the carved bridges. You can even see a tiny little main character like standing.
Can you
Yeah,
really?
you
I need
can.
to know
It
where to
is.
look because I'll need to look that up when I get a copy to like physically to be like,
Yeah, it is
in
amazing. I
there.
love this cover. And if you kind of follow me on Instagram or on Twitter, like every now and then I post a little cover detail, like just like a super magnified version of like a little part of the cover. And I love that because there are so many Easter eggs in the cover which relate to the book. So I feel like people when they end up reading the book and then they kind of go back and kind of look at the cover, like
You're
you'll
like,
be
oh,
like, oh my,
it's all there.
yeah, yeah, it's all
Yeah,
there.
and
So
I follow you on Instagram and I've seen the cover, but I haven't seen one of the magnifying ones. So I'll have to go back and be able to see where was this and try to find like plot points in your cover.
yeah, it's such a work of art. I love the cover. But yeah, that's exactly it. Like you know, it's super expansive, super like detailed, and it's very contained. So I love this book because like it is epic science fantasy, but it's also very much a story about a husband and wife, and it kind of follows their journey. Um, and yeah, you kind of get to see their relationship and you know how they're trying to survive in this like what is essentially a hostile but really beautiful world, but also how they're trying to save their marriage as they're doing that.
Well, exactly. And excuse me, I'm choking on something. I don't know what. So I'm trying to not choke online. But it's so interesting because it's not just important to them personally, but it's a societal thing. So you set up so much about this society. So yes, you do a lot of world building in terms of a physical world, but the cultural world you create is so rich and so detailed. And I really felt like I was living in this culture and understanding like, okay, marriages are important to people here, and it's not just because, well, it's happy for society, but it's like, no, this actually matters to the stability of their society in all these ways. And how you explain that's really interesting. So it's not just like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, that's just too bad for them. It's like, no, there's a lot more at stake here.
Yeah.
Oh, and Sarah Harvey's already entered the giveaway. So Sarah, cross your fingers, you might get one. If not, you'll just have to wait till June 13th and go get a copy yourself. But the whole idea of how they're working on all that and working through their personal problems while the society is falling apart. It's like, for you, when you were writing it, which was the bigger driving force, or were you always trying to put them in together so that their marriage and what was going on in society, which is kind of epically catastrophic, for lack of a better term, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we could crash into the earth and all die. So that could be a problem. Just,
um, I think they were both very intricately connected right from the beginning. Like I definitely started the story when I was kind of ideating all of this. Like I knew this was going to be a story about a husband and wife duo. Like I knew it was going to be a married couple. You don't often see that in science
no.
fiction fantasy at all. Like you often have like coming of age stories and all of that,
Mhm.
which nothing wrong with that. Like, I enjoy those myself, but there's just such a lack of like married protagonists, and I really wanted to explore that. But for me also it was important to kind of have two people who are like hyper competent at in many ways like at the top of their game when it comes to like their careers, etc. um, and kind of put them in a world which, while they think they have so much power and they might think they have so much privilege, especially Eravan, like they're still dictated to by the conditions of their society in many ways. um, For me, like when I kind of started thinking about earth rages as well, and the climatic phenomenon, etc., and this massive like upsetness in their society about life and death and things like that. I mean, the reason it kind of worked together is because isn't that kind of like our lives right now? We have climate change happening, like
Yes.
icebergs melting, forest fires like right outside my door.
Right, it's apocalypse. Here we
it,
go.
yeah, it's here. And despite that, we've got like, okay, well, I have to cook lunch for my son, and I gotta go to work, and I gotta do this. Like, yeah, as I think like it, I feel like in Surviving Sky it really reflects the kind of lives a lot of us live right now in this world, where we do have these epic catastrophes happening in our world that in some ways like we have to deal with ourselves at an individual and societal level. But then again, we also have like just the busyness of life to kind of live through, relationships that we have to maintain, etc. And oftentimes like the big catastrophes that could potentially wipe all of us out, like they're still at such arm's distance, because the immediate problem that we have with our relationships or work or whatever that is, like that is immediate, right? So I think I
Yes,
just wanted to make
exactly.
that, have that balance really with Ahelia and Iravan and their world. So yeah, it just kind of work together.
Well, and it works so well because even though most of us are probably not dealing in, I mean, some people probably who are watching going, yes, I am a climate change scientist, but most of us probably in our jobs, we aren't dealing with problems that of that extremes. But with the married couple in your book, you've got these people who are both trying to come at things from different ways and then arguing about which way is better, and how are you contributing to our society, and are you contributing to our society, or are you just trying to have your own way? And I feel like those were huge issues as well, because there's this level of like, yes, they're both hyper competent people, but you've got one who's hyper competent and in power, and one who's like, yeah, you're doing a whole critique here on a science that we don't even want to exist, because as you said, Ahelia, she's an architect, or she's an archaeologist, and everybody's like, why are you focusing on the past? This isn't helpful for us. And of course, as things go on, we learn that, well, we do need to have a bigger understanding, and there are pieces of the puzzle missing, and if we don't understand, we aren't going to be able to keep our world literally floating above these earth ridges, which you've said several times. But I was getting at first the idea of like an earthquake, but then it felt like it was bigger than an earthquake. Like basically the earth is trying to kill everything in a specific area. And I'm going, I think we want to avoid these. That's
Yeah.
the big takeaway, is don't be on the ground or anywhere near the ground when an earth ridge happens. And I'm just going, as a Southern Californian, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good warning. I think, like, so the idea for earth rages did definitely come from like things like earthquakes and all of that. But like for me, it had to be bigger. Like it is something that encompasses the entire planet. So the way these storms work, it's a jungle planet, and every now and then you have these storms that unpredictably basically erode the surface of the planet altogether, which is why these civilizations have to exist above. They have to float above, and they kind of have to hover above the jungle. And it's only when those earth rages come to a natural end do these civilizations land, but again briefly, because this kind of keeps happening. And for me, it was so much more furious than than an earthquake, which can be so devastating. But this is something that erases like everything, and then life kind of, when I say life, like the jungle has to grow back again and that kind of thing. So no life is actually possible on the surface of the planet. It's When I say furious, I think that rage, like it's called the Rage's trilogy.
I
It's an
love it.
earth, yeah, it's the earth rage. And then between Ahelia and Ravan, who are the two married protagonists, like they have a lot of love for each other, but their relationship is like driven by so much anger towards each other and the circumstances of their lives, and how different the world is for one compared to the other. And I think that fury and that rage was a really driving like theme for me when I was writing it. And looking back, I'm just like, like I was really angry, but I can't.
I was going to, I don't want to ask about how things are between you and your husband. I mean, maybe this was a good outlet to just
Yeah.
let everybody hear.
I know people always make that assumption, but
Like,
actually, my husband, this is not based on my real life at
I
all.
should hope not.
Um, no, it's, but I think it is based on like anger that I feel generally when it comes to, so many things that are inequitable and
Yeah.
different in our world. Like one of the driving things between Ahilia and Iravan's relationship is, again, in that world, Iravan is a senior architect, which essentially means that he is the, for lack of a better word, like the wizard or the magician or whatever. Like he's a person who makes sure that he psychically manipulates plants
Mhm.
to keep them flying, keep these cities flying. He's one of the many people, but he is also, as a senior architect, like at the top of the hierarchy. So he's one of the few people who gets to like decide what form civilization really takes, like what that architecture looks like when they fly, like all of those cities decisions.
Right.
And
And he's like on this council, and it's
yeah,
mostly other architects with a couple of the engineers, and even
yeah,
that's kind of a recent thing. And everybody else is just at the mercy of what these few rarefied elite think
yeah,
should be happening.
yeah.
And it's there didn't seem to be a lot of democracy going on in this
No,
society.
he's
No.
exactly. It's and he is at the elite, elitist of the elite kind of thing. And then you have his wife Ahilya, who is not an architect. She can't do the magic. She's not born with the power, and she's kept out of a lot of those decisions. She and people like her because, again, architects rule society, and he or she is trying to find a whole different way for survival to happen. Even though there's these storms, etc. She's looking for a different way for survival to happen. And their relationship is marked so much by like a different power dynamic, the
Yeah.
kind of privilege that Iravan has, which Ahilya doesn't have. Um, it's I, I think that exploration of power and privilege is just very critical to the world of Surviving Sky, especially when you kind of, the more you read and you understand why survival developed in such a way. Survival is not such a straightforward concept. It's not just like, oh, this, we have jungle storms and so we're just going to float. Like it seems like that. It seems like that, but it also, like, I think survival also begs the question: survival of what and whom, and what is the cost of that survival and who pays that cost? Like, often the people who end up taking those decisions, like, they're not the ones who are paying the cost of it, right? Like, they're
Oh,
not.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that about how you handled this, especially with the idea of this kind of stratified society where there's certain people who have votes and certain people who don't, and certain people where it's just dictated at birth. It's like, well, did you get born with the power to project? And so, like, that's the term. So you said wizard, which I try not to giggle at it because
Yeah.
I never thought of Iravan as like a wizard, but I
No,
am
he's on. He's on.
doing
But
this, he's all Doctor Strange. But honestly, there are some things about that where they're literally, for people who are going, are they talking about this kind of in a, it's like as a metaphor? Like, no, we were actually floating an island, and because the plants are floating. And I was sitting there going, at some point I go, no plants naturally float. So there's something weird going on here. Like, trying to think what plants naturally have the ability to, no, none of them do. So there's obviously extra power and all this whole idea of even just a collective conscience, because it's not the power of one particular architect, but it's the power of them acting in concert, and they've got different levels, and even the younger ones. And I don't want to spoil any scenes, but at different points where you have other people who maybe aren't normally the ones who have to do something being spurred to action to save people. And like you said, this book has a lot of action. So people who are listening to this going, yes, that sounds very fantasy-esque with the floating stuff, but this is very much an action oriented book, especially even just right off the start. And I was just thinking and going, has our technology gotten to the point where we could do your movie justice with all the CGI we would need to be able to make this happen? I'm going, I don't know, but somewhere James Cameron's going, I could make it happen, because he does everything with all the CGI. So
yeah, I think it would like make an
also
amazing movie, but I also think actually it would make a really brilliant animation, and I've always thought like it would make an amazing video game. Like, I think that would be really fun to do. Like, have different levels of architects and engineers, and then solve these like
level up.
problems, etc. Yeah, keep leveling up, right? Like, except like when you do level up and you meet the big bad, the big boss, etc. You're just like, there's a whole host of other problems which I didn't know. There's a whole layer of, yeah. So
Let the gamer developers figure that one out. You just write your books and let them figure that out. It's going to deviate, but I mean, we've had video games turned into movies, so I don't see why we can't have a book turned into a video game. Like, all the media can start in one way and move to another. And I mean, I always want to picture this live action just because I want to picture the actors, because I love dream casting. Have you dreamcast your book already and gone, this is who I want as Aravan, this is who I want as Ahilya. Here's I don't even know how do you pronounce, is it Drove or Druve?
Dhruv, yeah. I don't I only have one Dreamcast, and that's for Iravan, and that's Senthil Ramamurthy. Like, he is
Well,
amazing.
because
Like,
he's like the most beautiful man on the planet. I think that's
it's
unfair.
true.
It's
Yeah,
like,
it's. I mean, but Iravan is also very, very handsome. So, like, for me, I'm just like, it's like that. would be perfect
Done.
casting. So yeah, I'm just like, he's gorgeous. But yeah, I mean, if Senthil Ramamurthy is interested in, reading the book, playing Iravan eventually down the line, then yeah, like, I think that would be
Yes,
amazing.
you volunteer to make sure you bring some truth and integrity to the role of Ahilia and volunteer yourself.
Oh.
Yes, I would do that. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That
I'd be
works.
like,
That
yeah,
totally works.
yeah. I mean, I totally wrote Ahilia, keeping me in mind. So yeah, that would that's when I would do that. But yeah, that's about as far as I've kind of come with dream casting. But I do have to drop a note here. So I actually work with two wonderful audiobook narrators for the audiobook of The Surviving Sky, and they are amazing. Like we had many calls, like we kind of bounced ideas off each other, and I heard snippets of it. I haven't heard the full performance yet, but I think they were the best picks for Ahilia and Nirav, it's a dual narration, and like they have done a phenomenal job. So I'm super excited for it. Like I remember when I got those audition lines from them, like they each of them read different parts of the book along with other selections as well, and I was just like, oh my god! Like as soon as I heard like Iravan's voice, the voice actor who plays Iravan. His name is Pranshu Mishra, and I was just like, I remember my agent saying, "Okay, I got chills." Like, so
yes, me
yeah,
too. Sign him now. Well,
yeah.
and then I can understand then saying animated or video game, because then you can have them do the voices, and it doesn't matter if whether or not they actually match the physical descriptions you did, which are really detailed. And I know you'd shared some of the character art, especially for Raven, because as an architect they have these interesting, they're not tattoos because they're internally generated on their skin, that's like a pattern of their trajectory and all this stuff. And I'm going, okay, yeah, that would actually look really cool. Probably cooler in something like a video game or animated versus in real life, where it's like, does that look right? Or does that look like he's got green stuff glowing? Is he toxic? I'm a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
probably a bad skin condition. He shouldn't have that. But it was beautifully described, because it's, I mean, it's not a stagnant thing. And you described so much in here that, I mean, it is, and I mentioned it to you earlier, it is a longer book. So anybody who's like, oh, I want something that's a quick read, skip this one, come back to it when you want something that's just going to be an immersive world. But it's because you have to build this whole world, and you're setting up for the trilogy. And where you left things, I will say nothing else, but I'm just like, where are we going next? And I cannot wait. And one of the other things I wanted to touch on, and again, this is the wiki that apparently I have to create, because
Yeah.
like, I don't create. Okay, so fan
Fan-based wiki.
start doing it, is the yakshas. And I had to resist Googling the word, because I'm like, is that a real word, or did you make that up? Because I don't have the cultural background to go, yes, this is part of our culture. And certain other things like the Rudra beads are things that are something from within the culture. And then other things like, okay, what of this is science fantasy and what of this is culturally driven? And you weave it together so well that someone who's like, well, I don't actually know, you'll never figure out what's what without somebody sitting there going, yes, no, she just made that up. No, that's thousands of years old. That's not new.
Yeah.
The yakshas, can you tell us a little bit about one, and how will I get one? Because I would like the tiger yaksha personally.
Oh yeah, that's a good one, right? Like that. Yeah.
But yeah.
So the yakshas in Hindu mythology are forest spirits. So that is actually a term that I borrowed from Hindu mythology. But in the book, yakshas are these like gigantic creatures, and they're not normal size. So like a tiger yaksha, for example, would actually be much bigger than a tiger in our world. But they are these big creatures who are the only creatures who survive earth rages on the surface of the jungle. So obviously, like human life does not exist there, and to a large extent, actually not as like even small animal life, things like squirrels, etc., make a point of calling that out. Like even those creatures can't exist on the surface of the planet, but it is only these yakshas who is considered, through the sheer virtue of their size, like they can survive. Yeah, like they're big monstrous creatures, but they're also the only creatures who can survive on the surface of the planet. So the idea of yakshas came, like the term itself came from Hindu mythology, and the fact that yakshas were forest spirits back in the day in Hindu mythology. But yeah, like how you would get one, I think I don't know.
But I'll have to see what I can do. But in terms of you're weaving together these concepts and then turning them a little bit for your own use, and then using things like the term battery doesn't necessarily mean what battery would for us, or at least how the battery works, and trying to figure out different ways. Especially, I think I've read enough post-apocalyptic fiction that we're always trying to solve the basic problems of survival, and the idea of whatever worked for us within the short kind of immediate post-apocalyptic thing, whatever turned our planet into a wasteland, those things may not last for sustaining society or regrowing a society, because it's definitely something that we're getting little hints at the beginning that this society, it can't go on like this forever. Like, this is not a permanent solution to, yeah, we're just going to float around. It'll be fine. We're going to float around forever. Like, humanity probably can't do that.
And it's also like, for me, when I was designing the world, is you kind of bring about like which terms were used, which were kind of Hindu mythological and philosophy based versus which ones, were just kind of in world. And I think for me, like when I was designing this book, it was a very deliberate attempt to kind of find that neat little space which which speaks to both the familiar and like the alien. And so there's a lot of terms, as you said, things like battery and architect, etc., which are words that we would use like regularly, but they mean very different things in that world. But when you kind of trace back, what a battery, the etymology, or even that something like that for archaeologists and architects, etc., or even the word projection, which is like totally a made-up word, right? But I've had people like actually use projection like after the book, like in regular parlance, and I'm like, like that word does not actually exist. And
I mean, it does, because we talk about like the projection or like trajectory. So we think about designing where something's going, but we aren't usually meaning it to, hey, I'm making the branch of that plant go over that way. And one of the things that you do that's just so lovely, and it's such a soft touch, because yes, there is world building, but there's also relationship building, and watching the home space for this married couple change based on how they're interacting, and like, oh, this is her favorite flower, or oh, this part is not doing, oh, he's not here right now, and we're going to change the space, and this is inappropriate for another woman to be in here. I'm going to make it much bigger so it doesn't feel intimate. And why is she here in my home anyway? She probably shouldn't be here. No spoilers on that, but again, I loved how you did that. But that whole idea of trajecting, it made sense. So the fact that you were using words that are familiar enough, but then you're using them in just a slightly different way, it lets
in
the
slightly
reader
different ways. Because trajectory exists, but projection does not. So for me, when I was kind of like creating it, it was very much like, I remember thinking about this. I was speaking to my husband about this, about how to kind of bring about just that term of projection, because it was very much trajectory shows like a path from A to B, and that's kind of what like projection also does. It is a it is magic and all of that, but it's also very much a state where one plant changes its form into a different form. So it does move from state A to state B. And the architects, when they're kind of creating their constellation lines in the moment to kind of make that happen, again, it's very much a path, right? Like that. I think that the connecting and the thematic presence of pathways and connection and mazes and all of that, like it's all very much embedded into the world. So I just had a lot of fun kind of making this book and writing this, and it's definitely a world that I found myself getting lost in. I'm kind of in the middle of writing the third book right now. My second one is with the editors right now, but I'm in the middle of writing a third one, and now as I'm kind of writing, I'm just like, holy shit, I love this book. Like, I love this series. I love like just getting back into this world and like losing myself in it. I also wrote this book during the pandemic, and so like it was obviously like I was more than happy to escape into a different world than the world that we were being offered at the time.
Well, and you have a 3-book deal for the trilogy. Is there any chance we can talk them into more books afterwards? Because I know we've had that happen before, where like Pierce Brown did his Red Rising trilogy, and then we got more books after if we beg enough to do that. I mean, I don't know how you're ending things, so obviously some of that will depend. You're like, if I blow up the entire planet, we might have some trouble. Like, with apocalyptic fiction, you always worry, like, how far is the author going to go? We'll see. But obviously, you still have 2 more books. So I haven't gotten to read the second or the third yet. Are we still dealing with, I don't want to say even who, but like a dual narration? Or are we going to introduce more characters? I'm curious what we're going to get.
It is going to be a dual narration for the entire trilogy. I think I was very clear about that going in, but that doesn't mean to say that you're not going to see more of other characters and what they think in the roles that they have. But at the heart of it, The Surviving Sky and the Rages trilogy is very much about Ahilya and Erawan as a married couple. It is their story. Yes, you have the world and you have the climate and you have all of that, but the driving force of the entire book and the entire story is their marriage. It is how they deal with each other while they're dealing with all of these things. So for me to keep that intact through the rest of the trilogy was like really, really important. I also feel like Ahilya and Erawan are the kind of characters who are they're so complex and they're so competent and they're so not linear that it's that they're in and of themselves, like they have so much story, and especially when they're kind of working with each other or against each other, as often the case is. there's just so much to explore within their own minds. And
We're manipulating each other, because some of the best scenes in there, like ones I'm going, oh, like, oh, you didn't.
yeah.
One of them asserts power over the other one. It's like, okay, that was a dirty trick you pulled there. Like, that's not cool, dude, or that's not cool, dudette. How did you did that? And then there's so many secrets too. And I mean, I don't know if you're a Supernatural fan, but one of the running jokes on anybody who watches Supernatural is it's a pair of brothers that go through their life not telling each other important things, like over and over and over. It's like, all of this could have been solved if you just talk to each other.
Yeah.
But there's specific secrets being kept for legit reasons here. So that's one of the things I really like. I hate
and also like, and I don't like the
communication
trope, the miscommunication trope either. But I've also found, like with Ahilya and Iravan, it is not so much about the fact that they don't tell each other things. It is that they don't know how to tell each other those things. And I find that the case in like adult relationships often. Like, it's never about like, oh, we'll just put you two together in a room and you can sort it out. Like, that's not how adult relationships work. That's not how any relationship usually works. It's not, people, it's often like, is this the right time to say it? Do you, is this person willing to hear this? Like, what about my own ego and my own pride and that?
Do they trust my motives? Like, one of the things, I won't say what, but one of the common points of dispute that keep coming up, it's really clear that it's like one of them just doesn't trust the motives of the other person for even asking what they're asking. And it's like, if you guys can't get on the same page with this is huge. But it's not a matter of, I'm not telling you the truth, or, oh, you overheard something and I'm extrapolating. It's like, no. And then you also have, because of their different societal roles, different obligations and things, that one person may not be able to tell the person because it's like, you're not allowed to. And that becomes a big thing as well. So
they're so smart. Yeah, and they're so smart that they can read between the lines. Like, it's, even if they're kind of, if the other person is saying something, I think for the other character, they're like, well, these are the words you're using. What words are you not using? What are you not saying? And they know each other really. Yeah, and they know each other so well. They've been, like, at the start of the story, they've been married for like 11 years or something. And so they know each other's like tricks and secrets. So it's not so much about the words that are being spoken or not being spoken. It's about the history and the weight and, just like all the many layers of it that they know of each other, which I find like fascinating in their relationship. But yeah,
and even their grudges too, because I mean, as it starts, this isn't a spoiler because it happens right away that they weren't even really talking when things started. It's like, that's a great way to start your book with a married couple. They're not speaking to each other. Like, well, what's new?
Yeah. They're not even speaking to each other. That's true. At the start of the book, like, they have so much anger towards each other that and which, I mean, you think about it, like, they are very like chatty characters. Like, there's a lot of dialogue in the book. Like, they obviously, and they both very, very articulate. I really find, like, for me, I found that one of the most fascinating things, like, which made Ahilya and Iravan so real to me, is like, these are two hyper competent, hyper intelligent, like, really, really, smart people, who don't fall in the trappings of like regular like miscommunication and that kind of thing. But it is only with each other that they are just like so like they're so similar and they're so different that they just like get on each other's nerves, but also they love each other. Obviously, like, they've been married for so long, and neither of them is ever understood the way that the other one understands each other. And I think that in many ways that is also their problem, is that they know each other as well as they know themselves. Like, too well. So how they say, like, it's, you kind of, if you meet your own doppelganger, like, you will probably want to kill them. Like, well, that's
my youngest kid keeps asking either for like another one of himself, like, I'm sorry you weren't a twin, but we couldn't handle two of you and you guys would murder each other. And honestly, it's like, it's the whole idea of like, well, opposites attract, but they're really not opposites in so many ways, because like you said, they are both such competent people. And the biggest separation is just by virtue of birth, of one being born with this power to traject and one not, and that ultimately automatically putting them different paths in life, because you're topped out if you are not able to do this, and if you are, you're automatically conscripted. It doesn't, I never saw anywhere it's like, oh, so you have the power to, would you like to use this power?
No, that's who you are.
Like, we need you to, and we also need you to understand the limits of this power and not go there. And I'm not going there, but you know that there are things there that there are just no choices in the society, especially when I think the closer you get to the brink of society, the fewer choices people have, because it's like, that's nice that you would like individual autonomy. We would like to not crash into the violent planet below. So
exactly. I think it's very much also the balance in the world of Surviving Sky between, as you said, like individualism and that kind of collectivism as well. Like, again, Iravan and Ahilya, they're both very, very individual characters. Like they have
Mhm.
a very strong sense of self, etc. But both of them are always trying to do also what is good for their society, and how they interpret society kind of changes through the book. You know, who they consider as part of the society. But even the ashram collective, like the city in itself, like it works really very much on, you know, many different consciousness kind of working together. It works on like people kind of having that balance of power, even at a very psychic level.
Mhm.
um and you know, things like the ashram will the city, the ashram will provide like a lot of things, like there's like free Medicare, or you
Mhm.
know, there's like and things like that. But also like you unless like your job helps survival, you know, actually being able to
You
float
can't do
above,
that job. That's
you
nice
can't do
advice to go
that.
do that, but
Yeah.
that's not what we need you to do. We're gonna have
Yeah.
you be over here,
Yeah.
and maybe you should switch to go be this instead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that's it's very like it's a very nice balance, I feel. And like it is like the world of surviving sky and Rage's trilogy, it is obviously so, you know, cataclysmic. It is there's obviously this like, you know, big storm, etc. happening. But there's also like beauty and like, you know, lushness,
Mhm.
and it's not like I often like struggle to call this book a post-apocalyptic book, even though
Oh,
it
because
is
people
this.
think Mad Max. People think,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, because honestly, the first comparison is gonna be the worst comparison. So you're gonna laugh. You're like, it's Waterworld because you're not on land, but it's like instead of going onto ships, we went into the sky. But it's very different. But the feel it doesn't feel apocalyptic in the way of like, yeah, and we're all just sitting here with our battle stripes on us and
Yeah.
you know, murdering each other. It's like, no, this is really a society that is worth preserving, and
Yeah.
that they have a life that they want to preserve, and what that life looks like might be more limited than what say ours is, but it's not like, yeah, people are out there
And it's
stabbing each other in the streets.
no, and it's lush and it's green and it's beautiful, and you know, you have like waterfalls and you have like these like amazing like marvels of architecture and
Mhm.
everything. But then
And
all of that
parks
is,
for children and all these things, and all of
yeah.
this. I mean, one of the things I was going to say is your language. I mean, you say the word lush, but your language is lush. And a lot of times you get books like this and it's okay, you're telling a good story, but the prose here is just gorgeous. And especially as you go on, there are places where you also take, I would say, more literary risks because it serves the story. So I love that you balance that, because it's
Thank
not
you.
just like I'm playing with language because it's fun, which is I have a tendency to do that. But it serves the story so well, so that you're using like a literary tactic and a way to show something on a level of consciousness or on a level of what the character is going through, rather than just trying to pick, okay, I'm going to really use five or seven different words here, but it's like, no, I'm going to pick one, but spread it out or show it differently. So I want to hear, because I will get the audiobook when I get a chance, because I'm going to need to, but I'm assuming it's not available yet. Arcs, we never get audio, but
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear how some of those later sections are going to be narrated. I'm sure they nailed it, but that's going
Yeah.
to be really interesting because it isn't just straight narration the whole time. But
No, it's not. And it's not going to be for like the trilogy itself. Like there certainly is, you know, literary, I wouldn't call them risks, but directions that have kind of gone in for specific scenes, etc. Because a lot of it has been, as you said, very much dictated. It's all been dictated by the story. Like, you know,
mhm,
what is the best way to tell this story? And I think at the heart of it, that's always, I kind of came back to that, which is weird because like the first book is coming out in a little while, in like less than a month really, and I'm kind of working through the third book, and so many
mhm,
like, you know, some narrative choices, etc., have remained very much the same. But given where the story is kind of going, like some of them have become so different. But also I'm in this like really beautiful position right now where I'm writing the third book and the first one's coming out, and I'm able to see like how many ideas were already embedded into the first book, which make their way into the third book. But when you're kind of reading the first book, you know, for the first time, you're just like, yeah, like this feels complete in and of itself. But
it
then
does.
like, but then you know, I feel like that's what it is with the Rageous trilogy and the Surviving Sky and, you know, the other books, etc., is like you think you know the answer, but then there's another layer to it, and then there's another layer to it, there's another like secret. So it's a very layered world and story. And for me, the prose of it had to kind of, you know, form meets function. Like it had to
Yes.
mirror that. Like so it was like I don't think that the story could have been told in a different way. And like I've had like a lot of opportunity to go back and forth and be like, well, the book is out now, like I can't
Do
make
it.
any
And
changes.
that's
Do I have
where
any regret?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
and it's a weird place to be, definitely, when you're working on the third book, and second book you said is in edits.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I can still tweak things here or there, but first book, that's done, and it's setting the course, and you can always alter a course, but you can't go back and be like, I'd like
No.
to change the third chapter in my first book. They're like, no, you can't do
No,
that.
and I love that, and I love that it kind of stands like, even like with the retrospective lens, I'm kind of looking at the third book, and I kind of look back at the first book, and I'm like, no, that's amazing. Like I love how all of these things kind of just add together. Like I wouldn't go back and change a single thing in the first book. Like I
Good.
really would. Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed reading it, so I'm going, please don't change anything.
Yeah.
Leave it alone. But I do want to hear your narrators, because again, like the voices, I feel like would bring so much of this to life. But I definitely enjoyed reading it, so I feel like this is one where people can go either way. So don't be intimidated by the size. You can always just listen to it. I don't know how many hours it's going to be, because it's a longer book, and I never equate hours to pages very well. It's like some weird algorithm and geometry.
Yeah, it is a longer book, but I mean, I kind of use thriller pacing in it, and I know earlier before
You
when you and
do.
I were talking, Allison, like it is epic fantasy, but it is also written like a page turner. So there is
It is.
enough, like there's so much action and just plot kind of moves along, etc. That it's not. I don't kind of linger and wax eloquent for like 20 pages about like a sword or whatever. Like it's so
Yeah,
I'm just
there
like,
are epic fantasies that do that, and it's like this. I would say you describe it as epic science fantasy, because it does feel like, I was joking in one of my posts saying, yes, I need to go get a PhD in metaphysics, because I'm going to have a hard time following all this. And you make it easy to follow, but it is one where you have to be paying attention, because there are so many things, so many different concepts coming. And if you put on the audiobook and then let your mind wander, you might be like, wait, what are we happening? I don't know what this term means.
Yeah.
Who is that person? Hold on. Like you're going to have to back it up and make sure that you are invested in this. And I mean, there's nothing wrong, I'm sure, with books that you can just kind of tune your brain off and let it just happen to you. But this one, it does require some cognition here to be able to follow, what are they doing and why are they doing it? But I appreciate that, because I like smart books, and you don't ever talk down to your readers either. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to spoon feed you all these little things that you expect us to keep up with. You're like, we're learning all this stuff about this ashram, and we're keeping it afloat. So catch up.
Yeah, keeping it afloat, no pun intended, but yeah, it's a group effort. So just like the book is. So.
Everybody, we're going to be buckling down here, making sure this doesn't crash into the giant elephant below us.
Yeah,
we're good. Because that's the first, for people who are like, what elephant? It's one of the yakshas, the very first yaksha, and being able to know, okay, so this is what we're doing as a group, and here's your individual role. Hey, I mean, maybe some people like that. It's the whole idea of your path made out for you. Trajectory.
Yeah, and and I like smart books too. Like some of my favorite work that I really enjoy reading, and just even media that I consume, is very much like it's smart protagonists making smart decisions at the time that they think are smart, etc. But also like being very real. And for me, like when I was kind of writing The Surviving Sky, and as I write the Rageous trilogy, like it is a smart book. It's based on Hindu philosophy. There's a lot of philosophical content in it, but it's never like dry. It's never like, oh, here's a thesis, that you got to sit and read it. It's like, here's this cool thing, and like we're going to be nerds and we're going to talk about it, but also there's like this gigantic like storm that we have to escape at the same time, while trying to make sure that we don't kill each other while having this conversation. So
right. It's like, and by the way, that person's being choked by a vine, so we're going to need to go fix this really quickly, because they're probably going to die if we just like sit here and wax philosophical for a while. You can't do that. It's like,
we can't do that. But it is like, the book is really, it's very much for the nerdy geeky person that I am, who like really enjoys kind of thinking about these philosophical questions often, or like going down like a plot rabbit hole, to be like, well, why didn't they do it this way? And because one of the things that frustrates me in when I'm kind of watching media and or reading books, and I'm like, there's this obvious solution here, like why didn't the protagonist do that? And I like to like bypass that in my own writing, is to make sure that obvious solution, there's a good reason why they don't do it, like or maybe the protagonist even like acknowledge that, but also whatever decision they take is, and I think this is something that Ahelia and Ravan often do, is like they take a logical decision based on the logic of their mind. But that's the thing about logic, right? It's a rationalization. You can rationalize anything. As long as you connect the idea, you can technically rationalize anything. And it seems like it's logical, but then you're just like, what the hell was that? So
that was a very bad thing. Well, and it's also the whole idea of based on the information you have at the time, based
Yeah.
on what information you're given. And that's one of the themes in your book is also, one of the things Ahilia is just exploring is like, well, gee, who gave us all this information? Oh, these people, all the architects. Gee, maybe some of the stuff here might be favoring their points of view and their ways of doing things. And so, of course, like you said, and I have the same pet peeve. Like, I hate when you go, why is this person doing this really, really stupid thing? And there's not even an explanation of why the really obvious thing. It's like, why are you jumping over the fence when there's a door right there and it's clearly open? Like, it's that kind of thing. And nothing like that happens in your book. And then when they do take riskier choices or things, you go, you probably shouldn't do that. You still understand why they're doing it and what motivates them, and your motivations are really clear, which I really like. And I mean, and I do love the two idiots in love who are really smart for being idiots at times, because those two things are very different, like your heart mind and your actual brain mind, and they don't always cooperate so much. I mean,
no, and I think that makes them like really flawed but real characters. I think like there are I got a review which was like, there's just this like very intimate stakes in the world of Surviving Sky, and another review kind of wrote how with the book, like it is, the book in and of itself is like whatever you kind of take away from it. I will say, like, it totally depends on a reader's perspective. If you're somebody who is familiar with Hinduism and that culture and all of those things, like you will definitely get a bit of a different like feel for the book. But if you're just someone who's like also reading just for the fun and for having a good enjoyable time, like there's that too. And this is not to say that one interpretation is better over the other. And I think this is something that was very critical to the Surviving Sky and to the two protagonists is, whether people like Iravan more or they like Ahilia more, like whatever your interpretation is of them, that is right. Because that's the right interpretation, because like I very deliberately got behind the eyes of Iravan and Ahilia, so that when you're reading Ahilia's point of view, you're like, oh my god, yeah, she's right. And then when you're reading Iravan's point of view, you're like, oh my god, he's right.
Totally right. Exactly.
Yeah,
and you did that really well, because it wasn't a matter of going, why is she with him, or why is he dealing with her drama? It's like, no, they both make sense. And the fact that you do have the dueling narration and going back and forth, you totally can feel the total logic from where that person's coming from and what their motivations are, even if it's like, this decision's going to destroy the person I love, but I have to do it. And maybe they'll understand, maybe they won't, but from their point of view, you understand it.
Yeah, it was very much about, I love getting behind their eyes. And like I know that I've had beta readers, etc., who've been like staunchly been like, I am Team Iravan, and somebody's saying I am Team Ahilia, and it's always fun for me.
Little buttons like Team Jacob, Team Edward, that's totally fine. More
that's okay with me.
That's totally fine.
I'm like, all right, like I'm just gonna be here writing writing this book, being both of them.
You get both buttons. As the author, you were entitled to all the buttons and all of them. I was going to say I would put them up there with like one of my favorite sci-fi couples, because I feel like there really aren't a lot of really established couples. And like you said, like there aren't a lot of married protagonists. And so often in fiction, we get like one person and one person only and their point of view, and everything that rests on them. And then here you have this dual set of people who are so very different, complementary, and then also antagonistic to each other, and also in love. And I don't know if you've read The Expanse, but they were very.
I haven't finished reading, but I'm a big fan of the show. But I haven't finished actually reading the books. But
I've read all the books and I've seen most of the show. There's a point where they diverge, and I know why they had to diverge, but I haven't seen the very last season. I'm like, this has gone too far off the rails from where the books are going to go, and I understand why. But I felt like the only other couple that came to mind as far as a science fiction couple who has this is Jim Holden and Naomi Nagata, where it's like, you guys. And they're very different than who your characters are, but the same kind of thing where it's like, these are my couple goals. There are couples like that, which maybe not the easiest lives.
No, but so like fascinating and endlessly entertaining. And as you said, like in the book, you do have these two perspectives between Ahilia and Iravan, but they're also not like, they never come across as narrow-minded characters. Like they're clearly thinking from multiple different perspectives. They're clearly thinking from like, they're not just like, okay, this is all I'm going to think, and this is the only way that I'm going to think. And they're very open to learning and to assimilating different points of view, so you do get that kind of richness and complexity even in them. But at the end of it, it's all kind of filtered just through their brains and through their minds and their experiences, as are any of our lives, right? Like we might be able to empathize and be compassionate and think from other people's perspectives, and to a large degree maybe even feel like quite closely to how they're feeling. But all of that is filtered through our own biases, our own narrative interpretations, our histories, our traditions, our culture, our day-to-day living, how we respond to the freaking weather, like
What color
our
is your sky right now? That might matter. Like everybody's
yeah.
sitting.
So exactly, like, so I think like this is where I feel like the protagonist and the story and just the thematic things of Surviving Sky really, really come together, because this is something I often find myself struggling with, is very much how do I as an individual position myself in this society and the world, and like at what point am I being fair to me versus being fair to the society, that kind of balance between individual and living in a greater world, and all of the risks and the just the complexities and all the questions often that come from that in trying to be a good person in a complicated world. I think at the end of the day, that is very much the struggle of both the protagonists, and there are no easy answers because those questions are not easy. And frankly, I'm not in the business of answers. Like for me, the questions are far more interesting than the answers themselves. So while all the plot questions and everything in the Surviving Sky, like all of that gets answered, like I think the real merit and the real like gold in the book and the series is the sheer number of questions that um, that the characters themselves think about, and that hopefully readers will end up thinking about too. Yeah,
Exactly. And I'm glad that it's not about you trying to answer the questions for people, but posing them in a way then that the reader is going to be going, okay, how would I feel in this situation? And how am I living my life right now? And am I doing the kinds of things that I'm criticizing them for doing? Like,
yeah.
am I being a responsible part of humanity here, or am I living just for myself? And what are my obligations to my larger society and then to my family? And where do those go ahead and have tension points? And you handle all that just beautifully.
Thank you.
I cannot wait. I am not kidding. I do need to listen to it when it's available, because I love audiobooks. I don't do anything without having an audiobook in my ears. And my kids are always like, hold on, mom, tap on me. Like, yes, yeah, okay, I'll listen to you now. But I get through so many things with audiobooks and I love them. So I'm always like, please read them. And they count as reading. They do. And I'm excited to read the later two. I'm assuming if you're in edits, you probably don't have a release date yet, or have they already told you, by the way, this is coming out?
Well, we're aiming for June the year after. So
Okay.
so this one is June 23. So then it would be June, sorry, not the year after, but June 2024 would be second
Yeah.
book, and June 2025 would be the third book. So we're still hoping to kind of keep to that schedule. Publishing is weird though, so not everything
Yeah.
kind of depends on like what we really want and wish, and so we'll see.
Don't
But that's
depend
the
so
aim.
much. I mean, that is the statement of the century. Publishing is weird, and then you never know what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
at least hey, what deadlines am I working on? Okay, I
Yeah.
will get those deadlines in. I will get my edits in and back to your editor, and your editor will just put a big happy face. No deadlines.
That's the hope.
So that's what I'm like, next draft is just going to be a big happy face, right? Probably not. That's okay.
I actually really enjoy edits, and my editor is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to the comments that I'm going to get. But also, like, I'm really happy with the shape of the story for the entire trilogy. Honestly, like it's really nice to kind of see how it's going to end. And to your earlier question, like, yeah, I mean, I love this world. Like, obviously, I've the first book is just coming out in a little bit, and then I'm working through the third book, but I'm not quite ready to say goodbye yet to this world yet. So I mean, I shouldn't be. I mean, the third book is only coming out in like 2 years. There's a lot ahead, and a lot of
Over
work
it now. You have some big issues to deal with. Like, I gotta get through the next couple of years. That's a lot.
No, it's like, but yeah, even as I kind of work towards the end of the trilogy, right now, I'm just like, there's so much here that I still want to explore. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm looking forward to reading the second and third book. And if you keep going, I'm not going to complain.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. For people who are watching this live, thank you so much. If you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit like and subscribe and share the video so people can find wonderful new books and wonderful authors. And thank you so much, Kritika, for joining us. And next month, we're going to have Meredith Shore. I don't know if it's Shore or Score, and I should have asked that before I agreed. And she's a Canadian romance author, so I don't know if there's a Canadian pronunciation for that. I got nothing. But Sarah Harvey says, woo! And I don't know if that's to next week or probably to your book coming out. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see everybody next time.
Bye.
Bye.